Thank you so much for coming back to another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about Ghost Rider. Benny Wan Strikes Back is back once again to talk about another movie, and I had him check out Ghost Rider this time, and you guys can expect to see him in the review for the sequel, Spirit of Vengeance, very soon. As usual, you can find the link to his channel down below in the description box. We're going to hear from him in just a little moment, but a big thanks to you, my friend, for being in this video. So Ghost Rider, directed by the same guy who did Daredevil just a few years prior, starring Ben Affleck, and is a film that definitely gets shit on quite a bit, a film that I like a lot more than others, and I'm excited to talk about it at some point. And similar to that film, this is another comic book film that gets a really hard time, and I honestly genuinely always enjoyed this film. It's not the best comic book film or the most compelling or well-written comic book film, but a film that I do thoroughly enjoy. This film stars Nicolas Cage, Eva Mendes, Sam Elliot, Peter Fonda, and so many others, and tells the story of Johnny Blaze. At a young age, Johnny Blaze and his dad had like an Evel Knievel type of thing going on. They were part of this circus act where they kind of did, or more of like a carnival, I guess, and they were doing this kind of Evel Knievel stunt show where they were on motorcycles and they were jumping through rings of fire, all that kind of stuff, your basic show inside of a tent, that kind of carnival. And not too long into the film, he finds out that his dad actually has cancer and is keeping it secret from him, and it's pretty bad at this point. So unknowingly, that same night, he's visited by the devil, who offers to save his dad's life and make sure that his dad is nice and healthy. And he kind of thinks that it's kind of like, you know, just bullshit. He's trying to brush off the devil in this moment. He's like, whatever. And he ends up having him sign this contract, and by accident, he ends up actually giving him his blood, making a blood oath with the devil. And the next morning, his dad, as his dad puts it, is healthy as a horse. Not too long into the next day, when they're at their next show, it turns out that the devil was lying to him. He did make him healthier, but he ends up causing his dad to have an accident during one of their stunts, and his dad ends up dying. And this sets on the path of him kind of being this loner kind of guy who's this great stunt guy, but he doesn't really know how to connect with people, and he's kind of this just kind of a loner overall. He just seems like a bit of a weirdo. And then we jump forward to the future, and we have Nicolas Cage's character, who, like I just mentioned, is a bit of a loner, a bit of a weirdo. He's kind of an eccentric character, and he's this really big stuntman. And he becomes Johnny Blaze, this big kind of Evel Knievel type of character in this story, who is known for doing these big stunts and kind of getting himself in and out of situations. And at the very beginning of the film, he ends up getting into a pretty gnarly accident that should have killed him, and he ends up surviving. And we find out not too long into the film that the reason that happened is because Mephistopheles was actually keeping him alive so that he could eventually have him become the Ghost Rider. The Ghost Rider is essentially a bounty hunter that whenever somebody kind of gives this blood oath to the devil, they kind of have this demon take over their body, who is kind of sent as a bounty hunter to take out other evil beings or demons that Mephistopheles, the devil, wants to get rid of. So after many years of not seeing Mephistopheles, the devil, or having anything really remind him of that time, or having to do anything with the Ghost Rider element, he ends up getting pulled into the whole story when Blackheart, Mephistopheles' son, ends up coming to Earth and kind of getting this other group of demons together with different abilities, and now Ghost Rider has been set free on these guys. And then in the mix of it, you find out that there's this scroll that the bad guys want to get that can bring out all the evil, and Ghost Rider's supposed to stop him, and yada yada. There's this whole story that unfolds. But let's start talking about my thoughts on the movie. On it overall, I find this film to be a good time. It has a point A and a point B, or, you know, it's a nice 3-act structured film where characters have arcs. I think it's a film that gets a hard time, and I feel like as a comic book film, it's just a good time. It's got some great action in it. There's some visuals in it that are a little bit dated as far as the CG, and some of the performances are a little bit weird. I would say some of the weirdest stuff is probably more around the dialogue than it is the performances, but it's a film that I find to have a good time with every time I watch it. Now, when I walked out of this movie as a kid, I had a good time just visually because I really enjoyed the character of Ghost Rider, and I've talked about it in previous reviews for comic book movies, but when I was a kid, I loved characters like Batman or Venom or Black Panther or the Ghost Rider or Nightcrawler, these characters that kind of had a darker look to them, because those characters kind of intrigued me a lot more. And then once I kind of got past their visuals, I would get more intrigued with their world and learn the world around them. So when I walked out of this movie as a kid, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was in my teenage years already, but I did thoroughly enjoy the movie just for what it was. But I did kind of feel this sense of disappointment simply on the fact that I felt like there was so much about the Ghost Rider world and the way that Marvel had expanded hell in that universe that they just never really touched on. Not to mention characters like Blackheart or Mephistopheles never really showing their true form the way that we've seen them in the comic books. Similar to something like Asgard and Thor, where Marvel took this, Norse mythology and was able to kind of bring it to their universe and add this superhero vibe to it and kind of expand Asgard in the world. The same kind of thing happened to Hell and Heaven when, within this storyline of Ghost Rider, there were these elements as far as things that you would see in the Bible and things like that they were able to bring into the story and kind of, visualize in this fun, big comic book way. And I was really excited to see that when I went to see this movie, and you just don't get that. A character like Blackheart, who is one of the main villains of this story, like I mentioned, he's Mephistopheles' son, who's probably one of my favorite parts of the movie. His performance in the film is a little bit overdone. I don't know the actor's name off the top of my head, but I've seen him in plenty of things, and he's a really solid actor. But I think that the director had everybody act a little bit over the top, a little bit cartoony. And I think one of my biggest negatives I have about this film is a negative that I have about a lot of earlier comic book films, where sometimes they just didn't allow the film to be a film that had comic book elements. They had the characters act very comic booky, and sometimes with a film like this, where there's certain people giving more realistic performances, and then there's other people giving more cheesy performances, there seems to be a little bit of an imbalance. That's not a huge negative I have with this movie, but it's something I felt like it's at least worth noting. Now, before I continue my thoughts on this movie, let's go ahead and hear what my buddy Benny Wan had to say about this.
Hey everybody, it's Benny Wan, and I'm back with Anthony to review another set of movies, everybody. We're going to do the Ghost Rider franchise. There's 2 movies in this franchise, so we're going to be doing the first one today, the one that came out in 2007, Ghost Rider, everybody. This movie is about a stunt motorcycle rider who sells his soul to the devil to save his father's life, and then years later, the devil comes back to basically turn him into the Ghost Rider, and he basically becomes the bounty hunter on sinners, everyone, for the devil. So that's the basic gist of our story. Like I said, this movie came out in 2007, so this was one of those early 2000s era Marvel movies before Iron Man came out and the MCU was established, because Iron Man came out a year later. So this movie was in that era of Marvel movies that were still kind of trying to find out what kind of movies they were going to be. So they were hit and miss back in that era. Were they still, in my opinion, some of them were still fun to watch though. So this movie stars Nicolas Cage as Johnny Blaze, aka the Ghost Rider. I enjoy him in this role. I don't honestly know if he was the best person to cast as Johnny Blaze, but you can tell that he's having fun playing this role because he's a really big comic book nerd, actually. Nicolas Cage is totally into comic books, and he actually was going to play Superman. Tim Burton was going to make a Superman movie. There's lots of stuff all over the internet about that. So Eva Mendes plays Roxanne. She's the love interest in the movie. I found that to be one of the weaker parts of the movie, to tell you the truth, was their love story and interest. So I just felt it to be pretty generic. Peter Fonda plays the devil, and we got the great Sam Elliot in this movie, everybody. He does a little narration, and he's in the movie basically playing himself. There's something really cool about his character, which I'm not going to talk about, but who don't love Sam Elliott? Come on. So on a story level, I think this movie actually, for that early era of Marvel movies, I think it's pretty well structured for one of those early 2000s era Marvel movies. I actually felt like they did a good job with the origin story of Johnny Blaze becoming Ghost Rider. I actually felt the story structure was good. The movie, it's not horrible. I did honestly have fun rewatching it. I haven't watched it in years. I probably haven't watched it since 2010 maybe. It's been a good 10 years. So I thought it was okay. I mean, I had fun with it. It's not the best Marvel movie. I mean, you watch any Marvel movies besides the early X-Men movies and early Spider-Man movies that were coming out since 2000 till basically Iron Man came out. They're okay and they're fun. Some of them aren't, but they're not horrible movies that you can't rewatch. In my opinion, I think most comic book movies are rewatchable. Not all of them, obviously, but most of them are rewatchable. So the special effects they're hit and miss. They don't all hold up. I do think that like when we get to see Johnny like first transform into the Ghost Rider, where like you can see his skin melting and everything, I think that looks pretty good. It is a little odd looking at a character that has just a skull with flames coming around it out of a jacket and stuff. It's odd, but the special effects look okay. I love the transformation of his motorcycle. That shit looks cool. I don't care how dated it looks or whatever. It looks cool, and it looks cool seeing him cruise down the freaking street, the highway, whatever, riding up a goddamn building with the flames flowing behind him. Like, that stuff looks cool. It looks badass. Even though it looks a little dated, it still looks cool. So, but, like I was saying, it's an early 2000s era Marvel movie, so the movie does suffer from what a lot of those movies did suffer from, which is they couldn't quite figure out what type of movie and tone that they were going for in these movies. I felt like this movie should have been really dark, and it was trying to be well funny. A lot of the movie I felt like, and I feel like it's Ghost Rider. It's one of their it's a Marvel Knights character, and I feel like they should have went dark with it, like really dark with it. You're talking about a guy that's a bounty hunter that has a flaming head, that he's a bounty hunter for the devil, and he's going after people from their sins, and like the movie should be dark. Like there's nothing wrong with having humor in your comic book movies, because the new Marvel movies have figured it out. They know how to sprinkle some humor in there, but they know how to make serious movies and darker toned and darker themes and stuff like that. So that's where I think the movie suffers the most, is just the tone. They can't figure the tone out of the movie. So, but overall, I did enjoy it, rewatching it. I had fun with it. So yeah, we're going to be doing the second one next. So thanks again, bro, for having me. I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to doing the second one with you. I'll send it back to you, man. I'll be catching you on Tube laters, because we have spoken.
As usual, a big thanks to Benny for being here in this video. I can't wait to hear what you have to say about the sequel, Spirit of Vengeance. And you guys can find the link to his channel down below in the description box. Go give him some love. Let him know I sent you. And again, thank you so much for being in this video, man. So yeah, Ghost Rider. It's not the best comic book movie, but it's a film that I do thoroughly enjoy. Now, I mentioned that some of the CG is a little bit dated. And I think that though there are some moments that some of the CGI is a little bit dated or a little bit cartoony, I think that it fits the overall film. And I think that that's super important when it comes to CGI. I've talked about it in the past, but I'm not really somebody who hates on CGI that looks a little cartoony or kind of looks a little bit dated, as long as it fits the overall visual tone and the kind of vibe and just feel of the film. And I think that this film does that fairly well. I think all the CG kind of blends into the movie really, really well. Though what I will say is I think that Ghost Rider and the CG on him looks a lot better in the sequel, though I feel like that's a far worse film. One thing that somebody pointed out to me not too long ago that I just think is so funny and I can't unsee now, that is just super, super noticeable, is that of course you have a real person in the suit, and I'm assuming it was Nicolas Cage when he becomes Ghost Rider. So, you know, the head and the hands are all skeleton and on fire, all that kind of stuff. But the body still kind of looks bulky, like there's like a, you know, fully formed human in there that didn't just turn to bone. So that's always been something with the comic books too, where you see, you know, Ghost Rider kind of looking jacked. You know, he's got bony hands and he's got a bony face and all that jazz, but he looks jacked inside of his leather, you know, suit all the time. And so in this movie, there's times where his hands and his head just look so small in comparison to his big human body. That's just something that I found kind of funny and at least worth mentioning. But yeah, you know, one thing that I really enjoy about this film is I enjoy the on and off relationship kind of thing going on with Nicolas Cage and Eva Mendes' character. They had some history at the beginning of the film, and I feel like their, you know, arc across the course of the film, you know, it's meaningful. It feels like something that you can kind of get attached to. And when I hear people kind of just shit on it, I think, you know, it's not the greatest romance. It's not the best character development of all time, but I think it's at least better than what some people say about this movie. Nicolas Cage in this film is really good. I enjoy him in this movie. There's times where he's over the top big Nicolas Cage, but then there's times where he's a little bit more serious. But his character is a little bit all over the place at times. I love the character of Johnny Blaze from the comic books, but this is not at all what I visualized he would be like. There's just moments in the script where he seems like he's kind of like this kind of weird, kind of wacky, zany character, and then there's other moments where he's a lot more serious, and then there's other times where he's a little bit more goofy and kind of over the top at times. So again, it kind of just feels like there's this inconsistency, but I think that Nicolas Cage was almost the perfect person to cast for that, because he's so good at playing it straight at times by also being goofy and being over the top. We already know that Nicolas Cage is great at over the top. Another great part of this film is Sam Elliott as the other Ghost Rider. Like I mentioned, this kind of Ghost Rider thing, there's been more than one. You know, when you become a Ghost Rider, you are the bounty hunter of the devil. And there's this other Ghost Rider that's in the film who rides a horse, which is such a badass sequence. I just really enjoy the music and the way that scene is shot when they come together at the very end of the film. But yeah, I really enjoy Sam Elliott in this film. I enjoy the exposition he adds on to things, because it doesn't really feel like somebody who's just kind of giving you exposition, even though it is. I feel like, you know, he just seems like a very interesting character, and I just really enjoy his character and the way that he kind of bonds with Nicolas Cage's Johnny Blaze throughout the course of the film. I think my biggest disappointment coming out of this movie was just not really being able to see Hell and these characters that were part of the Ghost Rider world expanded upon the way that they should have been. Mephistopheles is hardly utilized in this film, and when he is utilized, it's great. I really enjoy Peter Fonda as the devil in this movie, but he doesn't get enough screen time for you to really feel the menace that his character is in the comic books or in the story of Ghost Rider overall. And Blackheart is really the main villain of the movie, and I really enjoy him in the movie, and I enjoy the performance, though at times it's a little bit corny. But I enjoy that because it feels like, you know, I'm watching a comic book movie. It feels like a comic book brought to life. But my biggest disappointment when it comes to Blackheart is that he has such a badass, you know, character design in the comic books. I really loved how he looked. I always loved Blackheart as a character and as a villain. And to see him in this movie and really not see him be utilized the way he is and kind of be able to see him outside of his human form was kind of disappointing. I feel like they kind of missed an opportunity to kind of give us one of the coolest comic book characters brought to screen in a very cool way. There are a couple moments where you get to see him kind of like turn monstrous or kind of see that evil side to his face, but you don't really get too much of it. You know what I mean? There are a couple moments where you kind of see the human part of him kind of fading, and you can see the demon monster that's inside of him, the Blackheart. But even then, you don't really get to see much of it. And then there's kind of random weird scenes, like when Blackheart actually first appears in the movie, he's just walking down this kind of bad CG green screen like kind of road, or he's out like in a dirt field, there's like lightning going on in the background, and he's walking closer to the screen, and then he just kind of does like a jump scare where he like jumps at the screen and like his whole face turns all demonic. And I've always thought to myself, though I like how cool it looks, like, who is he screaming at and why is he doing it? So there's stuff like that in the movie where it's not perfect. There's some kind of creative decisions that make you question why they went that direction. But on an overall, I find this film to be a fun comic book movie that knows what it is. It's cheesy at times, it's over the top at times. It doesn't have the most compelling or well-written story, and there's definitely some moments that could have been cut from the movie, and there's definitely some imbalance at times with some of the characters. But it does have a beginning, middle, and end that you can follow and flow through. I find the characters to be engaging, and there's some great action in it. And all the Ghost Rider scenes, for me, are badass. As a fan of Ghost Rider, I really enjoyed it. As a fan of the comic books, I'm disappointed in the sense that there's so much about that world and the world of hell that Marvel expanded on that didn't even get touched on in this movie. And I really hope that one day when they do Ghost Rider again, that they do it right, you know what I mean, as far as really giving us the world of hell the way it should be seen, the way that Marvel expanded upon it, like I mentioned, similar to what they did with Asgard and Norse mythology in the comic books. So yeah, guys, I enjoyed this movie. I think there's a lot about this movie that gets shit on way more than it should, but I have a good time with it, and I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say. I'm sure plenty of you will have some negatives to say, and that's totally fine. If this movie is not your cup of tea, that's totally cool. I get it. It's not going to work for everybody. There are some elements when I watch it that I can say, yeah, I can see why that doesn't, you know, necessarily flow with everybody, but for me, I have a good time with this movie. Again, a big thanks to Benny for being here in this video. You can find the link to his channel down below. Loved hearing what you have to say, and he will be back very soon to do Spirit of Vengeance with me. Hit that like button down below if you guys enjoyed this video. Comment your thoughts down below. Can't wait to hear what you guys have to say. And as usual, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.